Have you ever wondered why Christian believers tend to do, think, or say things that don't make sense? From the bizarre practices and beliefs about science and politics to the way Christians can easily dismiss the most compelling evidence against their beliefs. Ever since my personal escape from Christianity, I've been on a quest to understand how I developed and maintained the beliefs that I did. I've also been on a quest to understand how the world works in reality. To those who have recently escaped Christianity themselves, I fully understand how terrifying it can be and hope that you find the content of this video to be helpful. Most major religions today have rigid beliefs about sex and sexuality. The most recent Christian purity culture movement erupted in the 1990s with purity rings and pledges, the symbols of their promise to remain celibate until marriage. The movement was thought by some to be a religious response to stigmatized social issues such as divorce, sexually transmitted infections, and abortion. For decades, many children, teenagers, and adults made enthusiastic vows of celibacy in regards to all forms of sex, masturbation, and pornography. Even though this type of sexual repression can look to some like a positive thing, there is a very dark side to the purity culture mindset that lays the groundwork for creating twice as many sex crime offenders and victims. Dr. Carol Queen, a PhD, sociologist, sexologist, and founding director of the Center for Sex and Culture, explained that you can also think of sexual repression as a powerfully felt restriction, often inculcated by family or community, and based in shame, disgust, or fear of one's own sexual interests. She goes on to say, if the no a person feels in an otherwise positive context is strongly colored by shame, disgust, or fear, repression might be the culprit. Sexual behavior is regulated in various parts of the brain, including the hypothalamus. This structure is in the emotional control center, which also regulates hunger, thirst, body temperature, sleep cycles, blood pressure, heart rate, and the sex drive. The amygdala is near the hypothalamus and is responsible for alerting us to changes in our environment detected by our senses. The amygdala is near the hypothalamus and is responsible for alerting us to changes in our environment detected by our senses. This part of the brain is also associated with sexual arousal. During sexual arousal, our bodies show the same signs as they would in a life-threatening emergency: muscle tension, increased heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, perspiration, and tunnel vision. Our brains evolved over the eons to have a few basic desires that we become aware of but aren't in conscious control over. Hunger, thirst, emotions, blood pressure, and the sex drive are all automatic responses that originate from the unconscious portions of the brain. We cannot decide whether or not to feel these automatic responses, but we can decide on productive ways to channel these responses so that they are not harmful to ourselves or others. Hunger is not something we choose to feel or become aware of, but the urge to eat is very insistent and will get stronger and stronger until you take care of the biological need to eat food. This is why certain fad diets and weight loss gimmicks tend to fail. If you feel hungry for long enough, your conscious resistance to the hunger sensation will eventually weaken and break, leaving the dieter to the whims of the subconscious, which has great difficulty thinking about long-term consequences other than the here and now. In the brain, the sex drive can be just as strong as the hunger drive in the hypothalamus and amygdala, if not stronger. Everyone is different, so people vary in their individual libido levels. Some people are asexual, where they virtually have no sex drive, while some people are hypersexual to the point of considering themselves addicted to sexual activity, while most people fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. For some, it can be difficult to accept that the sex drive can feel as real of an instinctual urge as hunger or thirst. Since we need to eat food and won't die without sexual release, it's easy to make a conscious rationalization that the sex drive doesn't require the same level of satisfaction that the hunger drive does. But herein lies the problem. It's a conscious rationalization. The hypothalamus and amygdala are unconscious parts of the brain, controlling everything from appetite, heart rate, and the sex drive. The subconscious parts of the brain that control these primal desires and urges are extremely powerful. The subconscious mind has a way of taking control of the conscious mind under certain circumstances, especially when those unconsciously generated needs are being suppressed. Think about the way that your hungry and thirsty sensations can drive you to eat or drink things that you normally wouldn't or aren't good for you, all because that primal feeling of hunger and thirst was so powerful. It's so powerful, in fact, it can essentially push the conscious mind out of the driver's seat. The brain evolved to work this way because it keeps humans, as well as the other animals, alive and reproducing. It is completely natural and healthy to experience a sex drive and to meet those sexual needs. However, many superstitious people who didn't understand how brain chemistry worked came to other conclusions. Although the subject of pornography deserves its own video and isn't the focus of this one, porn use statistics can reveal some intriguing insights into the way human brains work. Before the late 1990s, when the internet revolutionized access to information, pornography was available in books, magazines, rented video cassettes, and at a limited number of theaters that screened X-rated movies. But with the arrival of the internet, millions of pornographic images and videos were suddenly just a few clicks away for free. As a result, the internet quickly became the world's top destination for porn consumption. There are many points of evidence that demonstrate that the increased availability of pornography has greatly reduced sexual assault crimes in the world. It looks like easily accessible porn is a safety valve that gives potential sex criminals an alternative outlet for potentially assaultive energy. In the United States, the Justice Department's National Crime Victimization Survey reports that the sexual assault rate has fallen by 44% since 1995. That's nearly half of all sexual assault cases in the U.S. It is also around the time that internet pornography was beginning to increase in availability. In Czechoslovakia, from 1948 to 1989, the communist police state made possession of any form of pornography a criminal offense punishable by prison. As a result, porn was largely unavailable for Czechoslovakians. But when communism collapsed and the democratic Czech Republic emerged, it legalized pornography, which became easily and widely available. Using Czechoslovakian police records, researchers compared rape rates in the Czech Republic for the 17 years before porn was legalized with rates during the 18 years after. Rapes decreased from an average of 800 a year to 500. Again, that's nearly half of all sexual assault cases in the country. The legalization of porn in Czechoslovakia was also associated with a decrease in another type of heinous sex crime: the sexual abuse of children. When pornography was illegal, arrests for child sex abuse averaged 2,000 a year. After pornography became legal, this number dropped by more than half to fewer than 1,000 a year. That's over half of all child sex abuse cases in the country. In the 1970s, Denmark was another country that relaxed restrictions on pornography. Researchers compared arrest rates for sexual assault before and after the change. When pornography became more easily available, yet again, allegations of rape decreased. In the past 30 years, Japan, China, and Hong Kong relaxed laws that restricted the availability of pornography. In all three places, as pornography became more easily available, sex crimes decreased. UCLA researchers surveyed recollections of porn use among law-abiding men and a large group of convicted rapists and child sex abusers. Throughout their lives, the sex criminals recalled consuming less pornography, more evidence that pornography can serve as a safety valve. Instead of committing rape and child molestation, potential perpetrators can use porn as a sexual outlet that doesn't harm others. Also, when you consider that the regions of the United States with the highest porn consumption rates are also very conservative and religious, it gives even more statistical weight to the fact that porn is being used as a safety valve for sexually repressed people. Utah, the #1 state in the U.S. for porn consumption, is the headquarters of the Mormon Church, arguably one of the most sexually restrictive religions on Earth. Alaska, the #2 state in the U.S. for porn consumption, boasts a Christian population of almost 80%. Mississippi, the 3rd state from the top of the list for porn consumption, reports almost 60% of its population as very religious. In light of this evidence and research, it is clear that when people have a sexual outlet such as pornography, that sex crimes decrease. But why does it work this way? What can we extrapolate from this evidence? Christopher Ryan, a PhD and the co-author of Sex at Dawn, had this to say on sexual repression and violence. Nothing inspires murderous mayhem in human beings more reliably than sexual repression. Denied food, water, or freedom of movement, people will get desperate, and some may lash out at what they perceive as the source of their problems, albeit in a weakened state. But if expression of sexuality is thwarted, the human psyche tends to grow twisted into grotesque, enraged perversions of desire. Unfortunately, the distorted rage resulting from sexual repression rarely takes the form of rebellion against the people and institutions behind the repression. Instead, the rage is generally directed at helpless victims who are sacrificed to the sick gods of guilt, shame, and ignorant pride. This statement seems to line up with all the evidence we have seen so far. But there's more. In sexually repressed religious environments, sexual child abuse has been the subject of widespread media attention for the past several years. This increasing media and political attention has largely been the result of highly publicized instances of alleged sexual abuse within the Roman Catholic Church, which has involved an estimated 16,000 victims and 3,700 Roman Catholic clergy members. In light of this dark reality, members of various religious faiths, the media, and politicians have begun to question the frequency of child sexual abuse that occurs within other faith traditions in the United States, such as in Protestant Christian congregations. There are studies that demonstrate that the faith community is much more vulnerable to child sexual abuse than secular environments. The Abel and Harlow Child Molestation Prevention Study revealed that 93% of sex offenders describe themselves as religious, and that this category of offender may be the most dangerous. Other studies have found that sexual abusers within faith communities have more victims, and the victims are usually much younger. This disturbing truth is perhaps best illustrated by the words of a convicted child molester who was interviewed by clinical psychologist Anna Salter. "I considered church people easy to fool. They have a trust that comes from being Christians. They tend to be better folks all around and seem to want to believe in the good that exists in people." Across the United States, evangelical churches are failing to protect victims of sexual abuse among their members. As the Me Too movement has swept into communities of faith, several high-profile leaders have fallen. Paige Patterson, the president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, was forced into early retirement after reports that he told a rape victim to forgive her assailant rather than call the police. Illinois megachurch pastor Bill Hybels similarly retired after several women said he dispensed lewd comments, unwanted kisses, and invitations to hotel rooms. Maybe some of these leaders of the faith are truly sincere. Maybe they are just the victim of bad ideas, like sexual purity culture, which seems to breed more lewd behavior than accepting ourselves as the sexual beings we are. The statistical, anecdotal, and scientific evidence seems to all point to one conclusion. Repression of our natural and healthy sexual urges inevitably leads to unnecessary violence and injustices against men, women, and children. Sexual repression can often create twisted and bizarre kinks and fetishes when not allowed to have a normal, healthy outlet. Christians often use their frustrations and temptations as evidence of sin, that there is a sinful nature within all of us that tempts us to be sexual in ways that a deity restricts us from. Since the sex drive is as natural and automatic as hunger or thirst, it's easy to control people when you control their sexuality. We see examples in politics and religion where sexually controlling the constituents is a big priority. It keeps people submissive to their political and religious masters. It erodes away their independence and reason. And it creates more rapists and child molesters. The question then becomes, what can we do about this? We must educate our children, teens, and adults to understand that the sex drive is in no way sinful, It is just a natural and healthy instinct that evolution has built into us. We must realize that the primal sexual desires we experience should be satisfied in healthy and ethical ways instead of being ignored. Because the subconscious, primal parts of our brain will not be ignored forever, there is always a time of reckoning. The sexual frustration will come out one way or the other, violent or not, ethical or not, healthy or not. It's our job as responsible people to fulfill those needs ethically instead of pretending they don't exist or that they can simply be put on the back burner. Let's live our lives based on the science and facts rather than on antiquated superstition. Let's stop creating sexual abusers. To those who are suffering from losing their religious faith, please check the helpful resources in the video description for psychological and mental health assistance from qualified professionals. I truly hope that you learned something today. Remember to like and subscribe to help get this message out to others. Until next time, thanks for watching.